That year, July came early to Oregon. Not on the calendar, but in the air, hot winds drifting over the pine ridges, the riverbeds drying weeks before the monsoon rains usually returned. The locals in Canyon Falls, a small town wedged between old timberland and abandoned mine roads, said they hadn't seen a summer start this dry in decades. The hills turned yellow early. The deer stopped grazing in the open, and people, even lifelong residents, started to keep their windows shut at night. Something in the air had changed. No one said it out loud, but they felt it. And then the Monroe family arrived. Thomas and Amanda Monroe came from Colorado. Not by necessity, they weren't fleeing any public scandal, weren't fired, weren't bankrupt, but by something quieter, something harder to name. He was a geophysics professor who had taken what he called a long sabbatical, and she a speech therapist with a small remote clientele. They were the kind of couple who spoke softly with that worn but stable tone of people who had seen too much of something. With them came their 2 children, Rachel 12 years old, sharp-eyed and withdrawn, and Jacob just 7, always clutching a weathered blue stuffed animal that never left his side. They moved into a rental property on the edge of town, an old craftsman-style home off Ironwood Road, nestled in the trees hidden from the street. It had been on the market for years. Locals called it the Quiet House. No reason for the nickname, just that no one stayed in it long. But the Monroes did. At first, their arrival didn't stir much in Canyon Falls. It was a town of less than 800 people, 1 gas station, 2 churches, and more closed shops than open ones. People came, people left. What mattered most wasn't who you were, but how invisible you could be. And the Monroes, in that regard, fit in perfectly. At the grocery store, Amanda would smile politely, but never linger. Thomas rarely came into town at all. The kids were homeschooled, and the only place people saw them was at the library on Tuesdays. Rachel reading from the darker aisles, Jacob curled in a corner, whispering to himself or to his toy. Sheriff's Deputy Nolan Greaves was the only one who said anything, and only once. He told his brother over beers one night, "They're nice folks, but that family's carrying something. Can't say what. Just feels like they're looking over their shoulder even when there's nothing behind them." No one remembered that comment until later. Until the day the house went silent. It was July 5th, 2022. A Tuesday. Fireworks had echoed through the valley the night before, more than usual, some louder than legal. People drank too much, slept too hard. And no one noticed that the Monroe house didn't light up. No cookouts, no sparklers, no guests. No, it wasn't until Thursday, the July 7th, that the absence became noticeable. The mail was collecting. The garbage bin hadn't been wheeled to the curb. The family's golden retriever Ollie was nowhere to be seen, and he was usually walked twice a day. And then there was the smell. It wasn't strong, just odd, unnatural. Something like wet wood left to rot mixed with an iron tang. Enough for a neighbor, a retired nurse named Grace Halford, to call the sheriff's office. Deputy Greaves arrived at 3:17 p.m. What he found still haunts him. The front door was slightly ajar, not broken, just open a crack like someone had stepped out briefly and never come back. Inside, the house was still, too still, not empty, but not lived in. The dining table was set for 4, dishes untouched, food half-eaten, mashed potatoes with a skin forming over the top, chicken gone cold, 1 glass of water spilled on the tablecloth, another half full with dust speckling the surface. Greaves called out. No answer. He moved slowly, hand near his sidearm, breath shallow. The living room untouched. Couch pillows arranged, television off. Kitchen, a knife in the sink, no blood. Just a single used plate that didn't match the set on the dining table. Upstairs, the beds were slept in, but not made. Rachel's room had drawings on the wall, spiral's eyes, and something that looked like a tower with no top. Jacob's room was cleaner. Toy dinosaurs on the floor, stuffed animal on the bed. But the bed was cold. And in the upstairs bathroom, Amanda's cell phone shattered on the tiles as if dropped in panic. A smear of water? No footprints, outside no tire tracks. The family's SUV, a silver Ford Edge, was missing. The dog nowhere. The back door locked from the inside. There were no signs of a break-in. But something was wrong. Deeply, impossibly wrong. Greaves stepped outside and radioed it in. That was when he noticed it. Above the door frame on the inside of the house, carved faintly into the wood, barely visible, unless the sun hit it just right, it followed. Search teams were deployed within 24 hours. The forest behind the house was dense, old. The kind of growth that hadn't been touched in decades. Logging roads twisted into nowhere. Animal trails crossed into black, silent ravines. Dozens of volunteers walked the ridgelines. Drones were sent out. Thermal imaging, tracking dogs, nothing. Not a footprint, not a scent trail. Not even the dog. The investigation quickly became a spectacle. Reporters flew in from Portland. Internet sleuths combed through the family's limited social media history. Reddit threads exploded with theories, cults, kidnappings, secret tunnels, UFOs. But all the FBI had was silence. The Monroes were gone. Vanished. Not a single security camera in the county captured them leaving. No purchases, no GPS pings, no bank withdrawals. Just gone. And one detail stood out above all. A journal, left open on Rachel's bed. A girl with small, shaky handwriting that had started out neat, but in the final weeks had grown erratic, chaotic. Her last entry, Jacob says the man in the woods has no face, that he whispers at night. I told him it was a dream. But I heard it too. I heard him last night at the window. He said, "Come see." And I almost did. Almost. But I don't think we're going to make it another week. That sentence was underlined 7 times. After that, no more entries. 3 days after the initial discovery, the Monroe residence became a sealed zone. Yellow tape 24-hour patrol and a growing silence that began to spread outward like smoke from an unseen fire. Special Agent Eleanor Ross arrived from Seattle on a Friday morning. She had a reputation for handling unusual disappearances, the kind of cases that never made it to press briefings. Ross was quiet, precise, and deeply respected among the few who understood the kind of patterns that couldn't be explained with maps or logic. She entered the Monroe house at 6:42 a.m. She didn't leave until dark. What she found inside would stick with her for years. Not the food left out, not the shattered phone, not even the journal entries. It was the absence, the meticulous, suffocating absence. There was no sign of a departure, no suitcases missing, no toiletries gone, no favorite toys packed up. It was as if they'd been removed, like someone had reached in and taken them out of the scene, leaving everything else intact. At 8:11 p.m., Ross made a note in her personal field journal, "The air in the house is wrong. Too quiet. No bugs, no birds, no sounds outside. It's as if sound itself doesn't want to be here." That same night, she requested aerial infrared sweeps of the forest, stretching north toward Bell Knoll, an area just outside county jurisdiction and largely undocumented. Local rangers avoided it. Too many sinkholes. No trails. Too dense. But the name of the ridge kept popping up in Rachel's journal, once in a half-drawn map, once in a scrawled sentence she later tried to erase. He says the door is on the knoll. That's where it opened the first time. Ross didn't know what that meant. Not yet. On July 11th, a hiker named Marcy Villanueva, 27, disappeared while taking photographs near the ridge. She had nothing to do with the Monroes. But what was found in her abandoned backpack located 1.3 miles from the Monroe house would shift the direction of the investigation. A single Polaroid photo, unlabeled, uncreased, and impossible. It showed the Monroes, all four, standing in a clearing no one recognized. They were smiling, but not naturally. Amanda's hands were clenched at her sides, blood on her fingertips. Rachel was holding Jacob too tightly. Thomas's eyes were shut. And in the very corner of the frame behind a tree, something else. Something not quite human. A shape, almost like a man. Tall, thin, wearing something old, something that looked stitched from shadows. The proportions were wrong. The limbs too long. The face obscured not by motion blur, but as if the film refused to print it. Ross submitted the photo to FBI forensics. The film was genuine. The chemistry matched Polaroid stock discontinued in 1998. But the photo paper itself, too new. Untraceable. She went quiet after that. Her notes became more erratic. She stopped answering internal emails. And on July 13th, she went into the woods alone. She would later claim she'd only been gone an hour. But the logs showed she was missing for 9 hours and 17 minutes. When she returned, she was barefoot. She refused to speak for 2 days. And when she finally did, her voice was hoarse, almost unused, as if she'd been screaming in her sleep. She gave the lead investigator a sealed envelope and requested immediate reassignment. She was never seen publicly again. The envelope contained 3 things. 1. A hand-drawn map. 2. A photograph of Rachel much older, looking directly into the camera eye's hollow. 3. And a cassette tape labeled, "Only He Doesn't Follow." He waits. The audio has never been made public. By August, the official narrative was collapsing. There was no forensic explanation for the disappearance, no trace evidence, no proof of life, no motive. Thomas Monroe had no enemies. Amanda had no history of depression or delusions. And yet something inside that house had shifted. Investigators, officers, even reporters who entered the property described strange symptoms. Nausea, ringing ears, blurred peripheral vision. A persistent smell, not rot, but ozone. And more disturbingly, dreams of a door in the woods, always closed, always humming. It was a 17-year-old named Kyle Brennan who finally went looking for it. He wasn't a professional, just a kid from town, lived 2 houses down from the Monroes, had a crush on Rachel, said she wasn't like other girls, quiet and tense, always sketching strange symbols in her notebook. He found the journal pages before the FBI did. Pages she'd torn out and buried in the woods behind the house, wrapped in plastic, hidden under a rotting log. The drawings were meticulous, hundreds of them. The same door, tall frame, ancient, crooked at the top. Always drawn alone, always in the same position. Sometimes surrounded by trees, sometimes standing in water, and sometimes floating above the ground. One phrase kept appearing beneath them: "He doesn't open it." We do. That night, Kyle left home with a flashlight and a camcorder. Only one of those things ever came back. The camcorder footage recovered by a logging crew near Deerjaw Hollow 2 weeks later is still considered one of the most disturbing elements of the case. The video is grainy, night vision. He walks for nearly 20 minutes, muttering to himself. The forest is silent. No insects, no wind. And then, a sound. A bell. Low, soft, distant. He stops, whispers, "Did you hear that?" Then he keeps going. Breath getting heavier, panic creeping in. At minute 27, the camera tilts. Something seems to move behind a tree, a shape. Tall, still. Kyle gasps, and at minute 29:06, he says the last clear thing captured on tape, I think I found the door. The image shakes violently. A high-pitched screech, electronic, but organic. And then static. The final frame, blackness. But if you slow it frame by frame at 29:32, you can see something, not clearly, but enough. A wooden door frame standing in the clearing, with nothing on either side. Just waiting. The footage ended, and that should have been the end of it. Another teen gone into the woods chasing a ghost. Another cautionary tale that parents whispered to their children when curfew approached. But something had changed in the town. Something deeper than rumor, more ancient than superstition. The woods began to grow colder, even in late August. Birds stopped flying overhead. Old-growth trees untouched for centuries began to die from the inside out, and their trunks hollowed, blackened with a rot that no arborist could identify. And in the center of it all, the Monroe house, silent, watching, waiting. Those who approached it said they felt pulled like standing on the edge of a cliff in high wind. Some broke down crying on the lawn. One officer vomited just walking past the driveway. Another simply froze and said later, "There's someone else living in there now. Someone not alive." 2 months later, a man named Arthur Colgrave arrived unannounced. He was tall, wire-thin, dressed like he was from another time, canvas coat, leather notebook, no cell phone. He said he was a folklorist, said he'd heard whispers about Belle Knoll, said this kind of thing had happened before. The sheriff was skeptical, until Colgrave began naming things from the case file that had never been made public. He knew about the photos, he knew about the door, and he knew about the voice on the tape Ross had submitted, the one labeled, "He doesn't follow. He waits." According to Colgrave, the Monroe case wasn't the first, nor the 10th. He carried a map hand-drawn, annotated in ink, and something that looked suspiciously like dried blood. It showed a network of symbols connecting sites all across the Pacific Northwest. A cabin fire in 1954. No bodies recovered. An abandoned mineshaft collapse in 1921. The foreman vanished. A plane crash in 1983 with no record of a pilot on board. And a church bell that rang continuously for 13 hours after lightning struck a steeple long after the town had been abandoned, each marked by the same symbol, a door. Opened. Colgrave said the Belle Knoll region was an axis, a place where reality was thin, where the veil between worlds, however you want to define that, was frayed. And the Monroe family, they were drawn to it. He asked to stay overnight in the house, alone. He brought nothing but a lantern, a recorder, and a worn copy of The White Reaches, a book banned from most university libraries for its disturbing references to the architecture of voids. No one saw him for 2 days, and when he came back out, he looked older, gray at the temples, pale. He wouldn't speak until dawn the next day. He simply handed the sheriff a note. It read, "They are not lost. They are suspended. The boy dreams in loops. The mother hums songs that do not exist. The father kneels before a shape that watches without eyes. And the girl, she is waking up." In that fall, a new kind of fear took hold. Not panic, not hysteria, but a silent withdrawal. Families moved away without explanation. Gas stations closed. Mail stopped being delivered past mile marker 16. And the woods began to hum. People recorded it. A low bass-like tone, barely audible, always at the same frequency, 19.7 hertz. That frequency, scientists would later say, can trigger unease, anxiety, even hallucinations. But the humming wasn't mechanical. It came from the trees. And then, a second photo arrived. mailed anonymously to the county records office. No return address. Postmarked from Seattle. This one showed Rachel again, older than before, face thinner, but this time she was looking directly into the camera, and her eyes were black, not shadowed, not redacted, just black from lid to lid. She held a piece of paper in her hand. Zooming in revealed writing, "I remember the knocking." He doesn't open it. We do. That phrase again. The same as in her drawings. The same as in Kyle's last video log. The same as in Colgrave's research. Then suddenly, silence. No new sightings. No new disappearances. The Monroe home sat in the frost, slowly decomposing. The townsfolk spoke of it less and less, as if forgetting was some form of protection. And then, exactly 3 years to the day after the Monroes vanished, it happened. A fire. No ignition point, no storms, no signs of arson. But at 2:14 a.m., flames erupted from inside the Monroe house, not from the walls, but from the floor. Blue fire. Silent, almost graceful. By the time fire crews arrived, it was too late. The house didn't just burn, it folded, collapsing into itself. Not in ash, but in silence. As if it had never existed at all. Except for one thing. In the smoldering ruin, firefighters found a single wooden door. Freestanding, untouched by flame, closed, no hinges, no handle. And behind it, nothing. Just air. Just waiting. The freestanding door became a symbol. At first a curiosity, the object of online forums, podcasts, even paranormal TV crews who attempted to film it. But none stayed long. They said the camera batteries failed the moment they crossed the foundation line. Others claimed their footage came back corrupted frames repeating endlessly sounds, reversed as if time had been distorted. But most chilling of all, the door never moved. Not a tremor, not a breeze. And yet locals claimed that at 2:14 a.m. every night, if you were quiet enough, you could hear 3 slow knocks. Just once. Then silence. Sheriff Lane, now retired, returned to the site one morning with a journalist from the Yakima Observer. He hadn't spoken publicly in years and had refused all interviews about the Monroes. But that day in front of the scorched foundation, he opened up. His voice cracked when he said they weren't taken. That's not the right word. They accepted something, walked through something none of us could understand. And it wasn't evil. That's what people get wrong. It was empty. And that's worse. The journalist, shaken, later described the way Lane stared at the door like it was an old friend. Or a mirror. He said some people are haunted by what they saw. The sheriff, he was haunted by what he almost saw. What he was afraid would follow him home. 3 months later, the door vanished. Literally. One night it was there. The next morning gone. No marks. No drag trails, no vehicle prints, nothing but soft dirt, undisturbed, pristine. And it was around this time that new photographs began surfacing, grainy, low-resolution images emailed anonymously to local authorities and amateur paranormal investigators. In one, a figure stood in the background of a children's birthday party in Olympia, a man with no face. Just a blank smear where his features should have been. A woman who had attended that party later claimed her daughter had whispered that man came from the door. Another image surfaced from a highway camera in Central Oregon. A woman in a nightgown, barefoot, walking along the shoulder with her head tilted sideways. The timestamp 2:14 a.m. When police arrived, she was gone. But the dash cam from the responding cruiser caught audio. Very faint, barely audible. A girl's voice. I'm almost awake. By year 4, the media had all but dropped the story. Too strange, too fragmented, no suspects, no bodies, no explanation. But those who lived through it, the townspeople of Bell Knoll, the search crews, the children who had known Rachel, they remembered. Because the dreams had started, recurring ones, the same scenes over and over. A hallway with no doors. A house where every room leads back to the kitchen. A dining table set for 4 with no food. A knocking sound that never stops, even when you scream. Therapists across the region noticed the pattern. Patients who had never met describing identical dreams. One therapist began tracking it. She called the phenomenon the looping. And at the center of it all, the same phrase scrawled in journals, spoken under hypnosis, whispered during panic attacks. He doesn't open it. We do. Wynuk then, and in the summer of 2023, exactly 6 years after the Monroe family vanished, a breakthrough. A park ranger stationed 40 miles north of Bell Knoll reported a collapsed tunnel unearthed during a landslide. It was old, too old. Not on any geological survey. Inside were rusted metal tracks, remnants of a forgotten mining expedition. But deeper in, they found something else, a room. Perfectly square, walls covered in soot. In the center, a small wooden chair facing a blank wall. And resting on that chair was a cassette recorder. It had no tape. Just a single piece of paper folded inside the battery compartment. On it, in perfect block letters, Rachel Monroe is not asleep. The press didn't hear about this. But the recording, it made its way to Colegrave. He returned one final time, older, frailer, skin like paper. But his eyes burned. He stayed just one night near the site, camped at the edge of the woods, notebook in hand. And when he emerged, he left behind a letter addressed to the sheriff's department. In it, he wrote, "You don't bury these things. You don't solve them, you contain them. The family is not lost. They're inside the knock, inside the echo, inside the choice they made. And Rachel, she's still knocking, every night, waiting for someone to answer." Since then, hikers report strange sightings deep in the Bell Knoll wilderness. A child's voice calling from empty cabins. A man kneeling in the forest, his hands bound behind him, whispering apologies to no one. A trail cam captured a figure crawling backward out of an abandoned well, hands raw and red. Each time the timestamp reads 2:14 a.m. Each time they vanish before anyone arrives. And then last winter, it happened. A family passing through the region, unrelated, unaware of the Monroe case, pulled into a roadside motel just 20 miles from Bell Knoll. Parents, 2 kids, just a stop on their way to Spokane. They were assigned room 6. The next morning, the room was empty, door locked from the inside, windows bolted shut, lights still on, shower running, breakfast left on the table untouched. But no sign of the family, no footprints in the snow, no tire tracks, no exit logs, nothing, except one thing, a napkin folded neatly on the bed. On it, written in what looked like charcoal, and we heard the knocking. She sounds just like our daughter. They called it a second vanishing, and the timing chilled everyone because it was exactly 3 years to the day since the Monroe case had been officially declared cold. It was as if time itself was following a pattern, a rhythm ticking away in threes, in echoes. The motel room was sealed off by Washington State Police. Forensics found no fingerprints, no hair, no signs of struggle. The bedding was untouched, toothbrushes still wet, pajamas neatly folded beside the beds. But something was off. Investigators noticed the alarm clock, a standard plug-in digital unit, was frozen at exactly 2:14 a.m. They attempted to reset it. Nothing worked. The power was fine. The device hadn't shorted. It was just locked. as if time itself refused to move forward from that moment. Later, a tech brought in a magnetic field scanner, and when he swept the room, the needle spiked hard toward the corner, right where the TV sat. Behind the TV, carved into the drywall, were 3 lines. Not written, etched as if something had clawed it in. She remembers the river. He's watching the static. Don't bring mirrors. Suddenly, the Monroe case was back on the front pages. Podcasts resurrected the mystery. YouTubers posted side-by-side comparisons of the Bell Knoll door and the motel layout. A geospatial analyst uploaded a video overlaying the 2 locations on a map. His conclusion: the motel and the Monroe property were perfectly aligned, almost like 2 nodes on a line, with Bell Knoll and the motel forming mirrored points equidistant from a common origin in the forest. He called it the Rachel Axis. That video has since been taken down. The analyst, he disappeared 4 months later. Last seen driving into the woods with a whiteboard and a shovel in the back of his car. He never came out. But then came the most disturbing discovery of all. A man named Dr. Ewan Toller, a cognitive researcher who had been obsessed with collective trauma and nonlinear memory structures, requested access to the Monroe case files. He claimed he had seen Rachel in a dream, but not as a child, as a woman, grown, pale, drenched in shadows, wearing the same pajamas she'd worn the night she vanished, standing at the end of a long hallway surrounded by dozens of doors, each one slightly open. She kept whispering the same thing over and over. I can't remember which one leads back. Dr. Toller began sleep experiments, attempting to re-enter the dream through controlled lucid cycles. He claimed the dream was a place not symbolic, not psychological, but fixed, consistent. Every time the same hallway. The same clocks on the wall, all stopped at 2:14. The same dim light flickering from above. On the 4th night, he spoke to her. Asked her, "Where are your parents?" She turned slowly. "They left first," she said. "They knew it would be me." Then she pointed directly at him, and the dream shattered. Dr. Toller died 2 weeks later. Not from an accident, not from violence. He stopped sleeping. Autopsy revealed extreme neurological degradation, the kind seen in long-term insomniacs, but in a time frame that defied science. His last journal entry simply read, "I know the door now, but I don't know how to close it." And then, 3 months ago, someone tried. A former Monroe family friend, Elaine Creel, now living in Idaho, returned to Bell Knoll. She had kept to herself for years, declining media, never speaking about the case. But she arrived one night with a hammer and gasoline, telling the sheriff's office she was going to end the loop. She claimed she had seen Rachel twice, once in her backyard at 2 a.m. and again in a bathroom mirror. Both times Rachel said only one thing: "You let him in." Elaine made her way deep into the woods and set fire to the foundation. By the time police arrived, she was gone. They found her boots sitting on the edge of the concrete, facing inward. Next to them, a Polaroid picture. Old, weathered, burnt at the edges. It showed a family of 4 seated at a dinner table. The food was blacked out, inked over. The faces blurred. Only the child, Rachel, was clear, staring directly at the camera, smiling. That image is now stored at a private evidence archive in Yakima. Every attempt to scan it digitally results in file corruption. Facial recognition fails. Metadata reads Vorozro size, 0 Kabordim. But physical copies remain intact, and for those who've seen it, they all describe the same disturbing sensation. When you look at the picture, you feel like you're inside the room, not like a viewer, like someone at the table. Now, those close to the case whisper that the Monroe disappearance wasn't an isolated tragedy. It was a reaction, a side effect of something deeper. Not an entity, not a man in the woods, but a phenomenon. A space between wake and sleep, a moment in time that repeats. A knocking that doesn't seek entrance, but recognition. And here's the most terrifying thought. What if Rachel never vanished? What if she is still alive somewhere not in our world, but adjacent to it? And what if every time someone dreams of her, every time someone asks what happened, they're not remembering, they're answering? There is a road in Belle Knoll that no longer appears on GPS. Locals don't speak its name anymore, not out of fear, but out of caution. They say it's not that the road is haunted. It's that it remembers. Old forestry maps list it simply as Line 23, a dirt path carved in the 1950s to access water lines running into the deep ridges. But something changed in the last few years. The trees grew in strange, unnatural formations. Sound echoes differently. Time feels suspended. And according to 3 separate hikers, children's laughter can sometimes be heard in the fog, faint fragmented, as if it's leaking from an old cassette tape playing just behind the trees. In March of this year, a volunteer named Daniel Aves, obsessed with the Monroe case since he was 15, entered Line 23 alone. He carried 2 things: a voice recorder, a photograph of Rachel from 1984 laminated and pinned to his backpack. He walked in at 1:50 p.m., and just before 2:14 p.m., his recorder clicked on by itself. It ran for 3 minutes and 19 seconds. The audio chilling. Kortefilhanaren, Henneberschen script Daniel Aves, audio log, March 3rd, Belle Knoll Woods, shuffling footsteps, faint wind, Daniel whispering, "I know you're here. I'm not here to trap you. I just want to understand." Long silence, Daniel. "I brought your picture. The one from the playground? Do you remember that day? Crackling static, low thrum, possibly mechanical, Daniel." They don't blame you. Rachel, no one ever did. Momentary distortion sound, folds over itself, female voice, distant. Who left the door open? Silence. Female voice, closer now. He never stops knocking. Daniel terrified. Who is it? Glass shatter breath, heavy footfall distortion intensifies Daniel. "What are you? Where are they?" Female voice whispers. He watched them sleep. And then they watched him back. Long silence, Daniel, Rachel. A child's voice humming the lullaby from part 1. The audio ends abruptly. Search teams found Daniel's recorder lodged into the bark of a tree 6 feet off the ground, as if placed there gently. Daniel himself was never found. Only his backpack remained with the photograph missing. Since then, no one has entered Line 23. The town council declared it closed unofficially and put up wooden boards. But strange reports continued. A UPS driver claimed to see a little girl in pink pajamas standing in the middle of Route 6. A teacher in Portland found Rachel's full name scratched into the underside of her classroom desk, a desk no one had used in over 20 years. A woman in Seattle filed a noise complaint after hearing a knocking behind her bathroom mirror. 3 knocks paused, then 2. Every night at 2:14 a.m. Aufgeht's. Okay, it's out, so here we are. 3 years since that motel room. 6 years since the Monroes disappeared, and nearly 4 decades since a little girl whispered, "Something's outside." We're left with fragments, patterns, audio, static, dreams, and a picture of a family that may never have existed or may have crossed into a place where existence is different. Not measured by memory, but by attention. Because that's the terrifying truth, isn't it? The more we look, the more we dig, the more we think about them, the louder the knocking becomes. Maybe the Monroe family didn't just vanish. Maybe they were answered by something ancient, something that doesn't live in forests or buildings or dreams, but in the space between noticing and forgetting, in the pause between knock and answer. And maybe Rachel didn't run. Maybe she opened a door, and someone or something walked through. Do not look into the mirror at 2:14 a.m. Do not hum the lullaby, and never ever answer the knock. Because sometimes what vanishes is only waiting for you to listen long enough to bring it back.